Hello. Today's stories come from r/MaliciousCompliance. We've got 3 stories today that represent the top hits of the week, starting with Landlord tried to exploit me for free labor. I'm renting a little house out past the suburbs of the city I am currently working in. It is a little old and the appliances are a bit dated, but it was much cheaper than a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, and I move around every couple of years for work. My landlord lives out of state and doesn't have anyone local. So for the past year and a half, I haven't talked to anyone. Just pay my rent on time and keep doing my thing. About 4 months ago, plumbing issues started popping up and 2 major appliances decided to give up the ghost. I notified my landlord via email and written letter. I rent a lot and have learned to abide by the exact wording in a lease. After several follow up emails and phone calls, a local handyman showed up to look at everything and provide a quote. After receiving the quote for parts plus labor, the landlord told me flat out that they will not be paying for the repairs. They said that since I am an engineer, they would allow me to purchase parts, install them, and then deduct the cost of the repairs from my rent payment. They said it was either this or learn to make do. I was not super thrilled at this response. I replied back to them saying if they were willing to deduct my time and cost of the parts for my rent, that I would get started immediately. Thank you very much. They were thrilled to hear it and asked me to send receipts for their records when everything is finished. Great! Now, to put together all the pieces and get to work. The first step was to file for an LLC with my current state. Next, I set up some cameras and borrowed a GoPro from one of my hiking mates. I was able to document all the repair process, from me watching YouTube videos of how to do things to me making multiple runs to the parts store to get that piece I didn't know I needed. Here is the kicker. At my day job, I make over $50 an hour. That is what my time is valued at. The final bill for everything has worked out to be about 12% higher than the quoted cost, and the landlord is very upset. But my lawyer added to the email chain has kept them very civil. Leave it to an engineer to be this diligent in capturing and recording costs. Let's check out the best of the comments. Occasional Human said, "Does your landlord know what kind of engineer you work as? I mean, an electrical engineer is as good as a sound engineer at plumbing and HVAC stuff. Not to downplay sound engineers at all. They know plenty about acoustics that I never will." OP replied, "I think I gave them my current job title on the rental application. Principal Software Engineer." Coder Joe said, "Legally engineered. Nice." The poopiest diaper replied, "He's smart. He'll handle it and save me money. Later." Oh no, he's too smart. On to our second story, which, based on the spelling, I think comes from the UK. Taking the work news to the news. I'm still unsure if it's really compliance, but my ex-employer announced some news regarding our jobs. It was obviously false, but instead of calling the bullcrap, I treated it exactly as I would have if it was true, and it bounced back in their face. It was a while ago when I was working in a community-based organization. We provided end-of-the-line shelter for people and did rights advocacy in a medium town, 100,000 people. The salary was low but okay, but most employees were there because they believed in what we did. The main problem was the manager. She didn't act accordingly to the set of values the organization was based on. She was grossly overpaid compared to employees, took everything personal, made sure we were cut off from the administrators, and created an atmosphere where people feared retribution. We were unionized, but after a few months, I realized no one was ever filing complaints, even for trivial matters, because they feared she was going to lash back at them. Turns out she had done it to a few people in the past. Once I figured I wasn't going to stay there much longer, I decided to sign all the complaints I could. According to union, I could sign anything I witnessed, even if I wasn't the target. And I figured I would see them to the end and leave. That way, administrators couldn't claim not knowing, and there was a chance for my colleague to have a better work environment. So, of course, the next few months were a living nightmare. She picked on me regularly. Still, most people sided with me, at least privately, most of them fearing she would do the same treatment to them if they declared it publicly. One morning, she calls a staff meeting and explains that a large amount of complaints have been filed in the last months, looks at me, and the cost to settle them or to pay the lawyers to fight them might bankrupt the organization, and everyone is thus at risk of losing their job soon. Insert ominous music. Panic ensues. My colleagues are crying. They're calling their significant others. A lot of people are begging me to take them back, stating she got the lesson. Some of them are genuinely upset at me. In my opinion, it was obviously made to turn them against me. I mean, the sole emergency housing at a 100,000 people city, annually filled at 115% capacity, would be closing for a dozen complaints where I'm not even asking for money in any form over legal fees, which are usually budgeted in advance. Come on. It's basic fear brewing schemes. Normally, I would have questioned it during the meeting or tried to reason with them afterwards. But that time, I decided to comply with the narrative and treat it as true. I left for my break and did what I would have done if we were really closing, appealing to the public outrage to help us fulfilling our mission. I called the news, told them verbatim the morning announcement, the service hole it would create in the community, the job impact it would have in the city, etc. The local news picked it up. They called the manager and administrators about running the story, questioning how come there were enough complaints to threaten a 35-year-old pillar of the community services, asking what the complaints were about, etc. Before 4 p.m. that same day, we had another meeting to explain that we must have misunderstood the first meeting, as the organization was in no way, shape, or form in danger of closing. Sure, we must have misunderstood. Moral of the story: let those who brewed the pee drink it. Seems to me like that manager isn't a great fit. Super curious to find out what happened to her. Let's check out the comments and find out. Someone said, I see your crappy attempted intimidation and raise you public indignation. Someone else added, also, if you're the OP, they were saying Uno and played their last card. Flawless. Midwest MSW said she will be let go as soon as administration resolves the complaints. They won't admit to wrongdoing before that happens. I'm Cryptic added, you seem to underestimate the incompetence of nonprofit management. Judge's Duty said, this made me guffaw. Former nonprofit worker. Pink Pineapples 007 asked, so what ended up happening to her? Did management or the union finally look at the complaints? OP replied, first, they unblocked money to have one of the administrator present 9 to 5 every day, just sitting and chilling in an office shopping online to make sure nothing shady was happening. Yet, shady things did happen. After that, there was an investigation from a private firm, and finally, they offered her to quit without blame, which she did. We were very glad she left, but still amazed at how much impunity she had and how much money the organization suddenly could access. If our second story showcased some of the downside of a union, our third story is only the upshot. I'm sorry, I've been instructed not to help you with that. I work in a public sector job that's a union shop with a pretty active union. The opportunity to comply with poorly worded directions comes along fairly often if you're a troublemaking shop steward. And while sometimes it's worth a grievance, sometimes it's just way more fun to do precisely as I'm told. And they never seem to get that that's what comes next after I utter my favorite phrase in the world. Hey, would you mind sending me an email summarizing this so I have it to refer back to? We've used, up until really recently, a mainframe emulation program that's the flower of 1970s technology for the bulk of the work we do. I'm a bit of a geek for this stuff, and one thing I figured out how to do a number of years ago was write macros to automate actions. Everything from notices to be mailed out, to flipping through data screens looking for information, and even some data entry could all be automated. I was smart enough to not brag about this too much, so I didn't get voluntold to help support people with it. But I did tinker with it for years and had a pre-built toolset that I shared with anyone who asked. A friend I helped that way moved into management, and she contacted me asking for help with her staff because she knew how useful it was, but not his to do it herself. On a separate note, and also because I'm kind of a geek, I was representing a worker at that time who had been in a particular manager's crosshairs, to the point that they'd had IT put a completely unsettled keylogger on her computer. I was helping her with something else and was looking over her shoulder at her screen when I saw one of the alerts it tossed up. I asked her about it, and she said it was weird, but she didn't know what it was. So I dug through her computer a bit and I showed her what was going on. The reaction from this manager was volcanic. She summoned me to her desk and admonished me about doing stuff that wasn't my job and gave me very specific instructions that I was not, under any circumstances, to assist people with their computers or anything else that wasn't spelled out in my position description. Sounds good. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Could I get you to shoot me that in an email so I can follow up with any clarification? Certainly, she beamed at me. This was going so well. About 2 weeks later, my manager friend, who had had to pull some strings to get me released for a day to come out to her branch in another county, it was about 45 miles away, came by, since I was going to ride out with her. I showed her the letter from Miss Thou Shalt Not, who incidentally wasn't my supervisor, and who I knew full well hadn't told my boss about it or their boss. Sorry, I was instructed not to help with this. Not much I can do, see? She read through it and looked back up at me with a small but evil smile. You saved this just for me, didn't you? Of course I did. Merry Christmas in August, I guess. She had had no end of trouble with Miss Thou Shalt Not in the past, and the opportunity to rain down on her parade was just too good. She took the copy of the email with her, and they had a private meeting in one of the conference rooms, and were joined about 5 minutes in by their mutual supervisor, who I was also on good terms with. She never did tell me what was said behind closed doors, but before the end of the day, I had an email retracting the previous instructions, and the manager responsible never referenced it again. The best part is, too, the employee I'd been helping told me a day or two later that she'd stopped getting those weird alerts all of a sudden and asked if I knew anything about that. CYA, can I get that in writing, please? So brilliant on the part of OP. Absolutely love it. Let's check out some of the funny comments, and there's a small update. Erwin76 said, what sort of amateurishly installed keylogger creates messages on the target's PC? Alan the All-Seeing added, we hope you are enjoying our product. Please consider upgrading to Sneaky Sneak Pro. Someone else said, fill out our anonymous survey so we can improve customer experience and company morale. Have to go P added, please open the history on your phone browser and hold it up to the laptop camera. Press any key when ready. Any key? Where's the any key? Fly Mouse said, voluntold, my new go-to word. Thank you for expanding my vocabulary with a word I didn't know I needed until I read it. In response to that, Wadsworth McStumpy said, a very common word in the military. It's pretty standard for an NCO to walk into a room and say, I need 3 volunteers. You, and you. El Bodster said, great story, but I am more concerned about a manager having a keylogger installed on somebody's machine. Please tell me the manager got a wrist slapping for that. Hopefully a career-ending one. Maybe it is because I have worked in a security background, but someone doing this would have their employment terminated and would quite possibly be escorted off the premises by law enforcement personnel. OP replied, nope, that was a time when HR was kind of rampant and IT was experimenting with new toys. It's gotten better, but they're very explicit about the fact that IT assets are intended for business purposes and literally everything you do is monitored. The industry I work in has access to an enormous amount of confidential information, including HIPAA-level protections and children's services investigations. So some of that comes with the territory. If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.